This name is almost sacred in Arizona, but the story actually begins in the mid-1800s. Jacob Waltz was a German immigrant miner, but everyone called him the Dutchman because Americans at the time couldn't distinguish between Germans and Dutch. Waltz discovered an incredibly rich gold vein in the Superstition Mountains. Even the name is ominous, isn't it? In the 1870s, this gold was so pure, so valuable, that Waltz lived comfortably in Phoenix for years on what he extracted from this mine. But he never told anyone about the mine. He only trusted two people, a Mexican partner and a woman named Julia Thomas. When Waltz died in 1891, he gave Julia Thomas a crude map and a few clues. According to what he said, the mine could be found by near a pointed rock formation called Weaver's Needle, a marker visible from a specific angle inside a canyon, a hidden cave entrance. But after Waltz died, Julia Thomas and her friends couldn't find the mine, and thus the legend was born. Chapter 2. Who is Barry Storm? Barry Storm, real name John Griffith Clymenson, was an American adventurer, writer, and treasure hunter born in the early 1900s. He developed a passion for gold hunting at a young age and decided to find the Lost Dutchman Mine in the 1930s. Storm wasn't your typical treasure hunter. He was well-educated, intelligent, and methodical. He studied historical records, interviewed old miners, talked with Apache tribe members. Because remember, the Superstition Mountains were Apache territory, and the Apaches considered this region sacred. Storm's research revealed something important. The Lost Dutchman Mine legend wasn't a standalone story. It was actually a combination of several different lost mine stories. The Peralta Mine. In the 1840s, the Mexican Peralta family operated a rich gold mine in these mountains. But one day they were attacked by Apaches, and nearly the entire family was massacred. They buried their gold somewhere in the mountains, and it was never found again at Waltz's mine. The mine discovered and operated by Jacob Waltz, the Apache sacred gold. According to the Apaches, there was a hidden gold deposit in the mountains, but it was cursed, and whoever touched it would die. Barry Storm believed these three stories actually pointed to the same place. Chapter 3. The search begins the early years. In the mid-1930s, Barry Storm gathered all his savings and settled in the Superstition Mountains. At that time, this part of Arizona was truly wild. Dehydration, rattlesnakes, scorpions, scorching days, and freezing nights. Storm's strategy was simple but difficult. He would investigate every inch, examine every cave, skin every canyon. And he did. In the early years, he faced terrible hardships. Money problems. His savings ran out. He couldn't buy food. Sometimes he ate only canned beans and desert plants for days. He would go to Phoenix, work odd jobs, save a little money, and return to the mountains. Dangers. Once he was bitten by a rattlesnake. The nearest town was 20 miles away. He injected himself with anti-venom and survived. Another time he fell from the cliffs and broke his ribs. He stayed alone in camp for weeks, injured. Loneliness. He didn't see a human face for months. To keep his sanity, he started talking to himself. He kept a journal. This book is based on those journals. But his biggest enemy was doubt. Is the legend real? Am I wasting time? Am I crazy? Chapter 4. First Discoveries. In his second year, Barry Storm began finding small but significant clues. Old mining marks. He found mining marks from the 1800s carved on some rocks. These were Spanish or Mexican-style carved markers. This was proof that someone had been mining here centuries ago. Hidden tunnels. He found an old hidden tunnel in a canyon. The tunnel was hand-dug and went about 100 feet deep. It had collapsed at the end, but Storm believed this might be one of the Peralta family's mines. Mysterious deaths. As Storm deepened his research, he learned that dozens of people had indeed died mysteriously in these mountains. Some had disappeared. Some were found shot. Some died in unexplained accidents. Local Apaches weren't surprised. The mountain is angry, they said. The most interesting find was this. Near the giant rock formation called Weaver's Needle, from a certain point, there was a natural map in the rocks. Shadows and cracks seemed to form an arrow pointing to a specific canyon. Storm spent months analyzing this natural formation. He photographed it from different angles, at different times of day, and he discovered something. At sunrise on the spring equinox, the shadows formed a perfect arrow. Chapter 5, the first real lead. In his third year, something incredible happened. Storm met an old Mexican man in a Phoenix bar. The man's name was Pedro, and he claimed his grandfather had worked for the Peralta family. Pedro told Storm, "My grandfather survived the Apache massacre. Before he died, he told me about the mine. He said there's a special rock. It looks like a horse's head. When you find that rock, the mine entrance is 200 steps to the north." Storm was skeptical. He'd heard dozens of similar stories. But Pedro gave him something tangible, an old Spanish coin from the 1840s, and a piece of paper with symbols drawn on it. Storm returned to the mountains with renewed energy. For 6 months, he searched for a rock formation resembling a horse's head. And then, on a scorching July day, he found it. The horse head rock was there exactly as Pedro had described. Storm's heart was racing. He measured 200 steps north and began digging. And he found an old mining pick and some rope. Someone had been here recently. This was both exciting and terrifying. It meant Storm wasn't alone in this search. Chapter 6, the competition and danger. Barry Storm wasn't the only one searching for the Lost Dutchman Mine. Dozens, maybe hundreds of people were looking for it. Some were professional miners. Some were amateur adventurers. Some were just desperate people hoping to get rich. And some of them were dangerous. Storm began noticing that someone was following him. His camp was searched when he was away. His supplies were stolen. One night, someone shot at him. The bullet missed his head by inches. Storm realized he was in a deadly competition. Some treasure hunters believed that if they eliminated the competition, their chances of finding the mine would increase. He started taking precautions. He camped in different places each night. He set traps around his campsite. He always carried a loaded gun. But the worst incident happened in his 4th year. Storm was exploring a canyon when he heard a loud explosion. Someone had set off dynamite near him. The explosion caused a rock slide. Storm was trapped under rocks for hours. He managed to free himself, but his leg was severely injured. He crawled back to camp, barely alive. It took him 3 months to recover. During his recovery, Storm had time to think. Was this worth it? Was he willing to die for this gold? His answer was yes. Because for Storm, it wasn't just about the gold anymore. It had become an obsession, a mission, a purpose in life. Chapter 7, the Apache Warning. One day, an elderly Apache man visited Storm's camp. His name was Thundercloud, and he was a tribal elder. Thundercloud told Storm, "White man, you search for the sacred gold, but you don't understand. This gold is cursed. It belongs to the thunder gods. Those who take it will anger the spirits." Storm, respectful but determined, asked, "If it's cursed, why did the Peralta family mine it?" Thundercloud replied, "And they all died, didn't they? The mountain took them. The mountain will take you too if you continue." But Thundercloud also told Storm something important. There is a place we call the Room of Death. It's a cave where ancient ones stored sacred gold. Only the chosen can enter without dying. Many white men have tried. None succeeded. Storm asked where this place was. Thundercloud refused to say exactly, but he pointed to a general area, a remote section of the mountains that Storm hadn't explored yet. After Thundercloud left, Storm had to make a decision. Should he respect the Apache warnings and stop, or should he continue? Knowing the risks, he chose to continue. But from then on, he left offerings at Apache's sacred sites, tobacco, food, small tokens of respect. He wasn't sure if it would help, but it felt right. Chapter 8, The Breakthrough, Finding the Cave. In his 5th year, Storm made his biggest discovery. While exploring the area Thundercloud had indicated, Storm found a narrow crevice hidden behind thick brush. The crevice was so well hidden that you could walk past it 100 times and never notice it. Storm squeezed the crevice and found himself in a natural tunnel. The tunnel went deep into the mountain. Storm lit his lantern and proceeded carefully. After about 200 feet, the tunnel opened into a large cavern. And in that cavern, Storm saw something that made his blood run cold. There were human bones, lots of them. Scattered across the floor of the cavern were the skeletal remains of at least a dozen people. Some appeared to be very old, possibly Apache or Spanish from centuries ago. Others looked more recent, treasure hunters who had found this place and died here. But why did they die? There was no sign of violence. No bullet holes, no weapon marks. Storm investigated further, and then he noticed something. The air in the cavern felt strange. Heavy, difficult to breathe. He quickly realized, bad air. The cavern had poor ventilation, and toxic gases, probably carbon dioxide or methane, had accumulated. Anyone who stayed too long would suffocate. This was the curse. Not supernatural, just deadly natural gas. Storm marked the entrance clearly and retreated. He knew he'd need special equipment, breathing apparatus, to explore the cavern safely. But he couldn't afford such equipment. Chapter 9. Financial Struggles and Persistence. By his 6th year, Storm was broke. Completely broke. He'd spent every penny he had, plus borrowed money, on this search. His family had disowned him. His friends thought he was crazy. He had nothing. He faced a choice: give up and return to normal life, or continue and risk complete ruin. Storm chose to continue, but he needed to be strategic. He decided to write articles about his adventures and sell them to magazines. The pulp magazines of the 1930s loved adventure stories, and Storm's real-life treasure hunt was perfect material. His articles were published in magazines like True West and Desert Magazine. They didn't pay much, but it was enough to keep him going. Storm also began giving lectures in Phoenix and other Arizona towns. He'd show maps, tell stories, show photographs of his discoveries. People were fascinated. Some even offered to fund his expeditions in exchange for a share of any gold found. Storm accepted a few of these partnerships, but they rarely worked out. Either the partners couldn't handle the harsh conditions of mountains, or they got greedy and tried to double-cross Storm, or they simply ran out of patience. Through it all, Storm kept searching. Year after year, canyon after canyon, cave after cave. Chapter 10. Close Calls and Near Misses. In his 8th year, Storm had several experiences that convinced him he was getting close. The hidden map. In one canyon, he found rocks arranged in an unnatural pattern. When viewed from above, he climbed a nearby peak. The rocks formed symbols that matched some of the symbols on the paper Pedro had given him. This couldn't be coincidence. The gold or sample. In a dry creek bed, Storm found a piece of rock with visible gold in it. He had it assayed, tested. The gold content was incredibly high, over 40%. This meant there was a rich gold source somewhere nearby. The old camp. He found the remains of an old mining camp, rusty tools, broken pottery, remnants of a tent. Based on the artifacts, Storm dated it to the 1880s. This could have been Waltz's camp. Each discovery raised his hopes. Each disappointment crushed them. But Storm kept going. He wrote in his journal, "I am either the most persistent man alive or the biggest fool who ever lived. Time will tell which." Chapter 11. The competition intensifies. By the late 1930s, Storm's articles and lectures had made the Lost Dutchman Mine famous across America. Hundreds of treasure hunters descended on the Superstition Mountains. The area became a chaotic mess of competing prospectors. Some of these prospectors were friendly and shared information with Storm. Others were hostile and saw him as a rival to be eliminated. Violence increased. There were shooting, sabotage, and suspicious deaths. The Arizona authorities struggled to maintain order in such a remote area. Storm himself was attacked twice more. Once, someone pushed a large boulder down a cliff, nearly crushing him. Another time, his water supply was poisoned. He survived because he noticed the water tasted strange and didn't drink much. The situation became so dangerous that Storm considered leaving. But then something happened that changed everything. Chapter 12. The Partnership. In 1939, Storm met a man named Charles Johnson. Johnson was different from other treasure hunters. He was a professional geologist with mining experience. He was calm, methodical, and had money to invest. Johnson had read Storm's articles and was impressed by his research. He proposed a partnership. Johnson would provide funding and technical expertise. Storm would provide his knowledge of the area and his research. They would split any gold found 50-50. Storm was hesitant. He'd been burned by partners before. But Johnson seemed genuine, and Storm desperately needed resources. They shook hands, and the partnership began. With Johnson's funding, Storm could finally afford proper equipment, better camping gear, breathing apparatus for toxic caves, dynamite for clearing collapsed tunnels, and even a primitive metal detector. Over the next 2 years, Storm and Johnson explored areas Storm had previously been unable to access. They cleared collapsed tunnels. They descended into dangerous shafts. They mapped vast sections of the mountains. And they found small amounts of gold, enough to cover their expenses, but nothing close to the legendary Mother Lode. Chapter 13, The Discovery. In the summer of 1941, Storm and Johnson were exploring a remote canyon that most prospectors had ignored because it seemed too difficult to access. The canyon walls were steep, and there was no water source nearby. But Storm had a hunch. The symbols on Pedro's map seemed to point to this area. After days of difficult climbing, they found a narrow ledge halfway up a cliff face. On that ledge was a small cave entrance, barely large enough for a man to crawl through. They squeezed through and found themselves in a small chamber. The chamber had clearly been worked. There were pick marks on the walls, and the floor had been excavated. And in one corner, they found it, a vein of pure gold running through the rock. Not a huge vein, but incredibly rich. The gold was so pure it shined in their lantern light. Storm and Johnson looked at each other. They'd found it. They'd actually found it. They took samples and climbed back down. That night, they had the samples assayed. The results confirmed it. The gold was over 50% pure, incredibly high quality. They returned to the cave and began careful excavation. Over the next months, they extracted about $20,000 worth of gold, equivalent to roughly $400,000 today. But here's the twist. This wasn't the main mine. The vein was too small. Storm believed this was one of Waltz's secondary diggings, not the legendary Mother Lode. Still, it was a significant find. Storm had finally proven that the legend had a basis in reality. There was gold in these mountains. Real, abundant gold. Chapter 14, World War II Interrupts. Just as Storm and Johnson were planning a major expedition to search for the main mine, World War II began. Johnson was drafted into the military. Mining activities were restricted because the government needed manpower and resources for the war effort. Storm's search was put on hold. During the war years, Storm worked various jobs to survive. He wrote more articles, worked as a prospecting consultant, and gave lectures. He also spent time organizing his notes and writing a book about his experiences. That book would become Lust for Gold. Throughout the war, Storm never forgot the mountains. He studied his maps, analyzed his discoveries, and planned his next moves. He was convinced that the main mine was still out there, waiting to be found. Chapter 15, Post-War Years and Reflection. After the war ended in 1945, Storm returned to the Superstition Mountains. But things had changed. He was older now, in his late 40s. The mountains, which had been challenging in his 30s, were now punishing on his aging body. Charles Johnson didn't return. He decided to pursue other opportunities after the war. Storm continued searching, but with less intensity. He made occasional trips to the mountains, but he also focused on other projects. He opened a small prospecting supply store. He wrote more articles, and he worked on his book. In 1949, Lust for Gold was published. The book was a success. It captured the American imagination, the story of one man's obsessive quest for gold in the American West. Hollywood even made a movie based on the legend, though not directly on Storm's book. The book brought Storm some financial stability, but also brought something else: more treasure hunters. Inspired by Storm's story, thousands of people descended on the Superstition Mountains. The area became a tourist attraction. Storm had mixed feelings about this. On one hand, he was pleased that people were interested in the legend. On the other hand, the influx of amateur treasure hunters made serious prospecting nearly impossible. The mountains were overrun. Chapter 16, The Mystery Remains. Barry Storm never found the legendary Lost Dutchman Mine, the main mother lode that Jacob Waltz had allegedly discovered. Despite 20-plus years of searching, despite finding smaller gold deposits, despite coming close several times, the big prize eluded him. But did Storm fail? That's a matter of perspective. In material terms, yes, he didn't become rich. He didn't find the legendary treasure. He spent more money searching than he ever recovered in gold. But in other ways, Storm succeeded spectacularly. He lived an extraordinary life. He had adventures that most people only dream about. He proved that the legend had some basis in reality. He wrote a book that inspired generations. And most importantly, he never gave up on his dream. Storm continued prospecting on a smaller scale into the 1960s. He became a respected figure in Arizona mining circles, the old man of the superstitions, they called him. He died in 1964, never having found the main mine. But according to those who knew him, he died satisfied. He'd lived life on his own terms. Chapter 17, Theories about the Mine. So, what happened to the Lost Dutchman Mine? Why couldn't it be found? Storm had several theories, which he outlined in his book. Theory 1. The earthquake theory. Arizona experiences earthquakes. Storm believed it's possible that an earthquake collapsed the mine entrance or changed the landscape enough to make the mine unrecognizable. Waltz's landmarks might have been destroyed or altered. Theory 2. The fake legend theory. Some skeptics believe Jacob Waltz never had mine. Perhaps he found a stash of gold left behind by the Peralta family and created the mine story as misdirection. Or perhaps he had a small claim elsewhere and fabricated the Superstition Mountain story to throw people off. Theory 3. The hidden in plain sight theory. Storm believed the mine might be in an area that's been searched many times, but in a location so cleverly disguised that it appears natural. Maybe behind a waterfall, or inside what appears to be a natural cave, or under a rock slide. Theory 4. The already found and re-hidden theory. Perhaps someone found the mine years ago, extracted the gold, and then carefully reared the entrance to prevent others from knowing. This person could have become quietly wealthy without drawing attention. Theory 5. The Apache secret theory. The Apaches knew these mountains intimately. It's possible they knew where the mine was all along and either collapsed it, guarded it, or kept its location a closely held tribal secret to prevent white prospectors from desecrating their sacred land. Storm personally believed Theory 3 was most likely. He thought the mine was still there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone with the right perspective to find it. Chapter 18, The Human Cost. Lust for gold isn't just about treasure hunting. It's also a meditation on obsession and what it costs. Storm was brutally honest about the price he paid. Financial ruin. He spent his entire fortune plus borrowed money on his search. He lived in poverty for years. When other men his age were buying homes and building retirement savings, Storm was sleeping in desert camps and eating canned beans. Destroyed relationships. His family relationships were strained to the breaking point. Friends abandoned him. Romantic relationships failed because he couldn't commit to anything but the search. Physical toll. Years of harsh living in extreme conditions aged Storm prematurely. He suffered from recurring injuries, malnutrition at times, and various desert-related illnesses. His body was beaten up. Mental struggles. Storm admitted to periods of deep depression and even questioned his sanity. The isolation, the repeated disappointments, the danger. It took a psychological toll. But Storm didn't regret it. He wrote, "I could have lived a safe, comfortable, ordinary life, but I chose to chase a dream. I chose adventure over security, passion over prudence. Not everyone will understand that choice, but it was the right choice for me." This is perhaps the most powerful theme in Lust for Gold. The idea that the search itself, the journey, the adventure, can be more valuable than the treasure. Chapter 19, Lessons from Barry Storm. What can we learn from Barry Storm's story? Several lessons emerge. 1. Persistence versus stubbornness. Storm's 20-year search shows incredible persistence. But where's the line between admirable persistence and foolish stubbornness? Storm himself grappled with this question. The lesson might be, Pursue your dreams passionately, but also periodically reassess whether the pursuit still makes sense. 2. The value of the journey. Storm found joy in the search itself, not just a potential reward. He loved the mountains, the solitude, the challenge. This suggests that if you're going to commit to a long-term goal, make sure you enjoy the process, not just the anticipated outcome. 3. Obsession's double-edged. Storm's obsession drove him to remarkable achievements, but also caused real harm to his life. Obsession can be a powerful motivator, but it needs to be balanced with other life priorities. For research and preparation, Storm succeeded where others failed because he did his homework. He researched, he planned, he learned from mistakes. Passion without preparation is just flailing. 5. Respecting the past. Storm respected the Apache traditions and the historical significance of what he was searching for. He wasn't just a greedy treasure hunter. He was genuinely interested in the history and culture. This respect served him well and is a good lesson for any endeavor. 6. Knowing when to share. Storm's decision to write about his experiences, even before finding the ultimate prize, brought him satisfaction and income. Sometimes sharing the journey is more valuable than hoarding the potential treasure. Chapter 20. The legend continues. Today, more than 60 years after Storm's death, people still search for the Lost Dutchman Mine. The Superstition Mountains are now partially protected as a wilderness area, which limits mining activities, but treasure hunters still explore the region. Several people have claimed to have found the mine over the years, but none have provided convincing evidence. The legend persists. Some recent developments. Modern prospectors use advanced technology, drones, ground-penetrating radar, sophisticated metal detectors, GPS mapping. The Superstition Mountain Museum in Apache Junction, Arizona, preserves a history and artifacts related to the legend. Several documentaries and TV shows have featured expeditions searching for the mine. The area is now a popular hiking and rock climbing destination, with thousands of visitors annually. Interestingly, a few small gold deposits have been found in the region over the years, lending credence to the idea that there is indeed gold in those mountains. Whether the legendary Mother Lode exists or whether it's just a combination of exaggerated stories remains unknown, but the legend continues to captivate people's imagination. Conclusion: the real treasure, Barry Storm's lust for gold, is ultimately about more than just searching for a lost mine. It's about the human spirit, the drive to pursue dreams despite overwhelming odds, and the question of what makes a life well lived. Storm didn't find the treasure he was looking for, but he found something else: purpose, adventure, and a story worth telling. He lived boldly. He pushed his limits. He refused to accept an ordinary life. In his final years, Storm was asked if he'd do it all again, knowing he wouldn't find the main mine. Without hesitation, he said yes, because the real treasure wasn't the gold. It was the quest itself. The mountains, the solitude, the challenge, the hope, the disappointment, the persistence. That was a treasure. The gold would have been nice, but the experience of searching for it, of living that extraordinary life, was the real reward. That's the message of Lust for Gold. Chase your dreams, not because you're guaranteed to achieve them, but because the chase itself is worth it. Live boldly, take risks, embrace uncertainty, and refuse to settle for mediocrity. Barry Storm died poor in monetary terms, but rich in experience. He'd seen sunrises over ancient mountains. He'd explored places few others had seen. He'd pushed himself to his limits. He'd written a book that inspired thousands. Was he successful? You decide. Closing. Engaging question and call to action. So here's my question for you. If you knew you'd spend 20 years searching for something and might never find it, but the search itself would be the adventure of a lifetime, would you do it? What's your Lost Dutchman mine? What dream are you afraid to chase? Think about it, because maybe Barry Storm's real legacy isn't about gold at all. Maybe it's about giving yourself permission to pursue something extraordinary, even if the world thinks you're crazy. If this story inspired you, resonated with you, or made you think differently about success and failure, do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell, and drop a comment below telling me what your lost mine is. What's that seemingly impossible dream you've always wanted to chase? And remember, the treasure is in the search. Always has been, always will be, Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next adventure.